Are we live on POW Channel
We
85 with
we are.
Harry and MSP? We are.
Yes, sir. Hey, TCAT, before we get into it, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. I'll introduce you in a moment, sir. But first, I want to thank everybody for joining the first of a 6-part series on topics that are relevant to MSPs, IT pros, partners, VARs, VAPs, resellers, computer guys, and computer gals. We go by a lot of labels. I could go on, system integrators, system builders, and so on. But thank you for joining us. Let me give you a little context real quick as to why we're here. We're here because you told us you want us to be here, and the way you told us was through a variety of survey techniques that we ran last year. In fact, some during election week. We hit 3 cities in Texas during election week, and today we have an election spin on the topic that we'll get to in just a little bit. We did some surveying over the holidays, and we did additional surveying early in the year. And here's what we heard. Given your druthers, you'd like to have online workshops this year. You appreciate the fact that we hit probably 25 cities last year, but our biggest competitor was traffic and also your thriving business. And so we appreciate you communicating that it just works better to do an online event in 2017. Want to thank our sponsors, Synnex and Fortinet. So appropriate sponsors for what we're going to cover the next several weeks. And we appreciate their support. It makes this community presentation possible, as well as the speakers that have offered to share their wisdom. A little bit of housekeeping up front. Be sure to use the questions feature to ask your questions. I'll be interrupting TCAT and reading those. And more importantly, we'll have plenty of time at the end for those. And then what's coming up on the calendar? So double check that next week is the second installment. We just go 6 weeks straight, so double check yourself on that. And it's Wednesdays at noon Pacific. And again, our polling data told us that. You did not want to have Saturday sessions, that kind of thing. I will be at DattoCon in Denver in the roughly the first week of June. That's June 5th, 6th, and 7th. If you're going to be around, love to see you. And then I'll be at WPC, also known as Inspire, June 9th through 13th. June 9th, we're having the annual SMB Nation Beer Fest. So we're going to get you more details on that. And then finally, Jenny and I will be in Austin, Texas at ChannelCon July 31st, August 2nd, 1st and 2nd. That's CompTIA's ChannelCon. So those are the big ones that are on the calendar for now. Now, without further ado, TCAT, I want to introduce you, sir. We go back, and you're going to talk about that, but we go back 20-some-odd years, and you're amazing, man. I mean, you were early Microsoft, and then you had TCAT University. It was all going fine and dandy until the Nisqually earthquake hit, but you pivoted. You're the cat with 9 lives, literally. So with that said, exactly. With that said, TCAT, why don't you grab it? Let's get started. We're here to talk about bots, artificial intelligence with an election spin, and I know you'll do a better job of introducing yourself. Sir, you have the talking stick. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you, Harry. I certainly appreciate your time and the opportunity. I know I've met a bunch of our fellow members at various conferences we've done over the decades, and so yeah, I'm still around. I might be retirement age, but I haven't retired, and I am here to talk to you about this is scary stuff, actually, bots and artificial intelligence. You might have heard the book George Orwell wrote, called 1984. He actually wrote that in the 60s. And at the end of the book, the main character is broken mentally. And he says, I love Big Brother. The truth of the matter is, there's only 2 kinds of computers out there. So I call it sand with an attitude. You might call it a Chipzilla or an Intel chip. And James T. Kirk in Star Trek ran into an alien species that called us ugly bags of water. And yes, I'm very much into programming and development of both Chipzilla stuff as well as ugly bags of water. And bots and artificial intelligence today are programming the programming computer between your ears. It is in fact quite insidious. On the election side, I want you to go back to the primaries between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton.
Okay,
Barack
so we're
Obama.
going back. Boy, two election. Yeah, quite a while. Okay,
10 years.
Got it.
Hillary Clinton was destroyed in the primaries by Barack Obama, and this is not a political thingy; it's a data thingy. Hillary Clinton used Twitter as an alternate billboard. She followed 0 people. Barack Obama had a team called BlueStageDigital.com, where they were an army of people, where Mr. Obama became the candidate for the Democrats and then eventually the president, because Blue Stage Digital responded back to people on Twitter, where she used it as a billboard. 0 followings. He followed hundreds of thousands. So they felt empowered and like being listened to. And this is where the AI stuff comes in 20 years later here now, or 10 years later. It really comes down to some of our audience here probably programs in F# and C# or Visual Basic or whatever. And what we're really talking about here is how to program the carbon unit computer. And this is where the AI and the bots come in. They say typically they say what you want to hear. And this is programmatic algorithmic stuff, because you want to be, you have an opinion, and then you look for ways to justify that opinion, to be part of a tribe. The alternative is maybe you're not part of that tribe, and then they'll use I used to feel that way myself once upon a time. I felt that way too. And then they present, I think current word is alternative facts, or point out other data to bring you over and say, oh, you don't feel that way anymore because ... and bring you over to their side. That's typically called sales. And now we're using artificial intelligence and bots and Twitters and Facebooks to turn you around. And if you keep hearing it and keep hearing it and keep hearing it, you start questioning your own judgment. And if you see it from enough points, you start going, oh, I used to think that, but I'm enlightened now.
Yeah, in TCAT, I mean, if you don't mind, I'll make this somewhat interactive. You and I typically converse, but two thoughts. One is the Saturday Night Live skit some time ago. Good Lord, as maybe a year ago. It's quite a while ago, about living in the bubble. They were actually profiling Brooklyn, New York, but you go to a coffee shop in Brooklyn, in one of the smaller sub-neighborhoods of Brooklyn, and you're in a bubble, and you meet someone, and you're like, yeah, you think like me. Hey, I like you.
Exactly.
And the other thing, and we can come back to this later, but I want to talk about buying traffic. So let's stay on the election theme in human nature, but we're going to come back to how you can buy bots and buy traffic and do this yourself. I'll make a note, TCAT. So please continue with your psychology. You're a scholar of psychology, my friend.
It's an amazing, insidious little world out there. You might find out on Amazon a book from an Arizona State University PhD called Influence. I read it 20 years ago. I bought another copy again. because I lost it. It's truly astounding, the points he hits on why we do what we do. And it's all about wanting to belong, is really what it comes down to.
Yep.
Uh,
Well, I know you're going to get to that in a couple slides. So that's cool. Tell you what, if you don't mind, why don't we move on to what's a TCAT, and we'll circle back to influence.
My name really is TCAT, by the way. I wasn't born that way. That was my Vietnam handle. However, I thought it was being, there's more than one TCAT. It's the Tokyo Rail System. In Texas, there's an education board standards. And then there's this old fart with about 50 books and a few more certifications than that. I started in 1965 on a GE 225 mainframe. And I've been kind of like lying low for the past 10 years, at least in some circles. And I've been very active as a volunteer with the ETAI org. And the president says little comments there about me. And yes, I am working on alternative international certifications because I work with a lot of third world countries. And I've been with CompTIA since it was a better computer dealer. And they can't afford in Costa Rica or Pakistan, Vietnam, whatever, they can't afford a $350 certification. So the last one I just worked on with was ITS, Information Technology Security, and that's live, and we're out now with the DOD to make that an alternative, because the way the soldiers are being treated now is they have to have the certification, say Security Plus or an equivalent, and that money comes right out of their GI Bill, and yet the requires it for their active duty MOS. And so, wow. So I've been working on alternatives, both for the soldiers and for third world countries. And so that's what I'm doing because I want to. And I want to get back to where about bots and history. Yep. And Harry.
Yeah, and TCAT, I'll tell you what, TCAT, let me put a wrapper on this. I'm getting a couple questions. So folks, the webinar today is about security. And TCAT has security clearance with the government and works frequently on different projects and was just in Costa Rica and so on. And the context of today's security is bots and AI. And the wrapper we're putting around it is election speak. So TCAT, why don't you grab it from there? We're on the bot slide.
Okay. I want to do a little history here because people think this is all new stuff, and it's not. Harry, I was dancing back and forth in Germany between Goethe Universität in Frankfurt and Humboldt Universität in Berlin. And we met over dinner, you and I and Gudrun, and Gudrun's sister's actually a PhD in theology. I'm talking on the Frankfurt side about theology, psychology, sociology, and in the Berlin side at Humboldt, I'm actually working on what we call voice fonts. A voice font is kind of like a typeface, however, imprint your voice. And so what I didn't tell you at the time, Harry, was I was working a project that didn't quite work out the way I wanted. However, I was working on weaponizing bots. So let's say you had to say things like radioactive raspberry. And the idea was to collect phononyms, because every human language has a finite number of symbols in the voice font. So we're going to pick on a dead guy, Fidel Castro. Now, this idea was, while it wasn't great, if we could collect the phononyms, we could put together the equivalent of a text aloud and write what we wanted to write and use the phononyms and have it come out in speech, so that maybe a certain leader of a certain island country didn't trust one of his generals because he said what we said he said, and you could hear him say it in his own phononyms. So we were weaponizing bots with voice. And boy, it's amazing how you don't trust somebody when you hear in their own voice over what you might presume is a intercepted cell call saying bad things about our fearless leader. And that's where we go back to. That's what I was really doing back there, Harry, when we met. I know you wanted to grab some of my notes on a book, and you published it, and that was fine. I was like, I don't give a rat's patoot. I knew what I was really doing.
Well, no, you do, and it's all that and more that have made you successful on the security side. But let me ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
It would have been 10 years ago when in fact, I think we were recruiting for attendees to go to one of the fall conferences. I think it was, first year in Vegas, not quite 10 years ago. And we're trying to drive traffic. And recruiting for a conference is its own unique challenge. It's a little bit more of an advertising challenge because it's a thoughtful, considered purchase. It's not an impulse purchase, and so on. And you and one of your partners, the gentleman in Atlanta, you were talking to me about bots, and essentially we would use Twitter to drive conversations between bots to make us look like we were heavily trafficked, and it does. I didn't listen very well 8 years ago when you were trying to explain this. I wish I had, because that's basically what they did in the election. Was
Right.
All of a sudden you have these bots, and you have 40,000 retweets, and you have 31,000 likes, and it does have a magnification effect, right? Like, wow, SMB Nation fall. God, I got to be there. Look at all that. And the way you were describing it is we could buy that traffic, basically. You can buy bots. And some of the listeners on the line would know that in the New York Times and other journals, it kind of came down to Eastern Europe. For some reason, there's these little villages with bot makers. And TCAT, again, this is your world in the Department of Defense, and I'm sure you know other sources, but let's talk about that, about buying bot traffic and amplifying what could be either fake news or go to a real conference or elect the person of or of not your choice by making you look like the bomb, right? You're so hip and cool and you got all this traffic. How does that work before we get into the maybe the influence book?
That actually tie together, because when we're not sure, we look around and get clues from other people. Let's say, I hate to use this, but Harry, I'm going to use you as an example because, well, we're friends. You're in a car accident. Your bicycle, no, better yet. I know you're an avid bicycle, so am I.
Yes, sir.
You're on your bicycle, you're riding along, and somebody creams you with their front fender and catches you and creams you on the street. And everybody's standing around and sees this. They will all look at each other for clues, what to do. And in fact, nobody will do anything because they're all looking to each other for clues. When unsure, they just follow everybody else. It's the Pied Piper game. Now, if this was to happen to you, Harry, or anybody who's listening, the trick is to pick somebody and say, you in the yellow shirt, call an ambulance. I'm hurt. Then everybody will follow the Pied Piper and pick, and get your bicycle out of the road, maybe pick you up and get you off the road. They will look around, and without that, they'll just look around. Because this is why the bots work so good with this, combined with the AI. It's actually an influence game because we're not sure and we take our clues from others. And a curious thing, I want to go back to Frankfurt. This is what, oh my God. I was going to do some stock videography that day for the blog to video log for YouTube. And I'm running around the planet Earth picking up stock videography. And I'm going to do blah, blah, blah with Goodwin. And we were going up to my flot to pick up the gear. And in the elevator, I'm going up the fourth floor, and two guys coming on the third floor. Try. They get on, they're speaking in Deutsch, and they get off. And Goodwin says to me, they're from southern Germany. I turned around and looked at her. And it was like somebody put DMT in my breakfast. It was like the hand of God touched my forehead. And it struck me. Oh my God. We're all, if you're not American, you're European. And so we define ourselves as Europeans. And then we define ourselves as Germans. And then within Germany, there's 13 states. And, oh, the Stuttgart guy has a heavy disdain for the Cologne guy because they're party animals, and versa versa. The Cologne guys go, you guys just sit there and play with your cuckoo clocks in the basement. So we're all members of tribes and then sub-tribes. And that's an amazing. So we'll identify until we don't. And the bots.
And TCAT, yeah, I got a question for you about that. In terms of the sophistication, with it sounds like the last couple of elections. I mean, quite frankly, so that's interesting to me. This is nothing new, but it sounds like you're stair-stepping us into a way to foster division, basically using this technology, right? You guys drink too much, and then the other people say you just make cuckoo clocks, and you can amplify the divisiveness if that's where I think you're taking us.
You can use it, the divisiveness, or you can use it as a join.
Okay.
We're all Americans. We're all Germans. We're all this. We're all Homo sapiens. And you can use this or something as a pro or something as a con. It all depends on where you're trying to go. And it's just a data point. And you can use this with your artificial intelligence and your algorithms and your bots to sell for or sell against. And we follow the influence of the Pied Piper.
So TCAT, let's go there. With the audience we have primarily MSPs, partners, resellers. It's not so much I see them doing it for their own specific practice, their own business interest. Our MSPs, tend to be 15 employees or less or what have you. However, they serve clients, right? And the clients could be more interesting because every MSP kind of has that one large client. And I'm just thinking out here. Yeah, their anchor, and I'm thinking out here back in the day when I carried the bag in the mid the 90s, basically day to day, that I had one client in pharmaceuticals, another client in medical, and pharmaceuticals could be very interesting to strike up a conversation because ethics aside, let's just put ethics way over on the left hand for a minute. But you could influence things about your competitors' clinical trials, that kind of thing, or you could amplify things about your clinical trials. And TCAT, what I'm trying to do is I'm kind of trying to land it in terms of what a practical application would be for the audience to get their heads around, like to go talk to some of their clients and think about generating conversations. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I want our listeners to understand is we are programming a carbon-based computer as opposed to a silicon-based one.